Welcome to the Common Creative Podcast. My name is Paul Fairweather.
And my name's Chris Meredith, and we're on a mission to lift the lid on creativity through ideas, stories, and of course, visual cognition. And what a visual treat we have today, Paul.
Yeah, so today's guest is David Hinchliffe, who is an artist. So I've known David for 30 odd years, but I knew him for many years. I knew that he was an artist, but I knew him when he was a politician. So he was a councillor in Brisbane City Council for 25 years, and for some of those years, he was Deputy Lord Mayor. But he's been an artist since he was 12, but only started recently thinking of himself as a real artist. And he unpacks that story, Chris, amongst some others.
Absolutely. And the opposite of a Van Gogh type artist, a happy artist, a joyful artist, very keen to share his ideas and his tips for the rest of us. And interestingly, I think also a teacher, not just he's a practicing teacher, but he loves teaching, and that feeds his art as well. So listen to this amazing show. Lots of inspiration, lots of ideas for anyone who's even vaguely interested in creativity.
Let's get him in. David, welcome to the Common Creative Podcast.
Thanks very much.
David, hugely excited to meet you. Thanks for joining us.
It was a great pleasure to meet you as well, Chris. Of course, I know Paul for about 3 decades, but I still like him.
Well, that's nice to know. David, look, it's great to have you on the show at last. And as always, we just ask our guests to give a quick 60-second potted history. And as you said earlier, as a former politician, 60 seconds is nothing. But if you can put that aside for a second and just give us a quick potted history about the turning points in your life, about how you got from, I suppose, from art college to being an artist over 50 odd years.
Okay. Well, I started painting when I was 12 and living in New Farm. Paul can relate to that. So I was studied under John Rigby and William Robinson, very famous names in the Queensland and Australian art annals. But I had a change of direction. As a teenager, I became very interested in politics. And wherever possible, I tried to join up politics and art. And it wasn't always an easy combination. But I ended up getting into politics in my 20s and stayed there until my late 50s. But for 25 years, I was a councillor on the Brisbane City Council. But in each of those 25 years, I managed to sneak away for about 2 or 3 weeks and get enough painting done for an exhibition. So I've been exhibiting and selling paintings since I was 12. So that is coming up almost 60 years, which is a scary figure. Now I do it full time. I've been doing it full time for the last 14 years. And life is looking good.
David, there's so much to unpack just in that, but we spoke a little while ago and you said to me that, despite that history of painting since you were 12, you only considered yourself an artist when you got artist on your passport, which was in the last 10 years, which I think is amazing. So what is it about that, about, the fact that you have been an artist your whole life, yet, it's taking you to put it on your passport to think of yourself as a real artist?
Well, I think everyone knows the concept of imposter syndrome, and a lot of artists have it. I often say to my students that of the 3 ingredients in success, for success in art, the least important is talent. The second, more important, but not most important, is opportunity. A lot of people don't get the chance to paint. But by far the most important is attitude. And the attitude that is essential in success is convincing yourself that you can do it. And so calling yourself an artist, I know professional artists now. There's one who lives just across the road who still find it difficult to describe themselves as an artist. So for me, it was when I had to get a new passport and it asked me for my profession. And I thought, well, do I? Don't I? And this was about 12 years ago, and I wrote down artist. And from that point on, I identify as an artist at last.
David, tell me more about that. What's the problem? I mean, it's easy to write accountant or lawyer or doctor. That's all right. That's got status and so on and so on. But you could argue that artists contribute a whole lot more to the world, to society, to creativity, to freedom of expression. So, and yet the name carries a lot of baggage that we're scared of. Why is the name artist a problem? Why do we have imposter syndrome in relation to artists?
Okay. Well, maybe there's another syndrome I should mention, and that's the Van Gogh syndrome.
Uh-huh.
When I was growing up and I was involved in a lot of art awards and winning competitions and selling paintings, which for a 13 and 14-year-old was pretty heady stuff. My dad was very excited, and then he sort of realized, oh my God, he could end up being an artist. It's one thing to have a child who does a bit of painting. It's another thing to have a son who's an artist, because we know that artists are a bit mad. We know that they have all sorts of dependencies, usually alcohol or drugs, that they live miserable lives in garrets.
Yeah.
They have dysfunctional relationships with people. I mean, history is replete with all of those scandalous stories about artists. I think that's part of it. And the quintessential artist experience is the Van Gogh one, because it's so saturated with drama.
Yes.
And a lot of people have that feeling that it's not a proper thing. You're not being serious. I think that's changed enormously since my dad gave me the lecture about it's all good to paint, but not to make a career out of it, David. Since that lecture, I think everything's changed.
David, I can see you've still got both ears attached, so I can see, but maybe you don't suffer from Van Gogh syndrome. And you said earlier, life is looking good. So I guess you're feeling very happy about being an artist. And so what's the secret? How do you make that transformation from the let's say the guilty politician who really feels like an artist but has to be something important like that? How do you make that transformation? I'm guessing retirement was part of it for you, but how do people make that transformation?
Well, I thought I had retired, but of course I don't. I worked every day of the week and almost every night. How did I make the transition? I think that the world has made a transition in terms of how it sees artists. I think it's much more fashionable to be an artist. In fact, my worry is that most of the current generation that are going for our schools all want to be musicians, actors, artists. No one wants to actually do anything other than create. So we've created a very creative generation, and maybe we might have to wind that back a bit.
We need some engineers and mathematicians or whatever. Yeah,
we do. And I say, I run workshops and I have people who come and say, oh, my little granddaughter or grandson, they're really good at painting. And I say, well, try to beat it out of them, because we need more accountants. We even need more lawyers sometimes. No. We never need more lawyers.
Do you know, I don't think we do, because I think AI is going to do all that stuff for us. We need more artists.
Yes, well, that's one thing. It's interesting you mentioned AI, because recently I've been doing some workshops involving AI and discussions about AI. And I think that for the time being, AI can be a useful tool for artists. I'm not sure that it's going to replace artists. It's replacing a whole bunch of stuff around art. I opened an exhibition recently for people who had cancer and were doing art as therapy. It was a beautiful, beautiful exhibition. I read the descriptions that were attached to the paintings, and I started tearing up. And I turned to the organizer and said, who wrote these beautiful descriptions? They are so tender and meaningful and empathetic. And she meekly said, AI. And I thought, my tears dried up immediately. But if AI can make us cry, then we've got to be very careful about how we apply it. But it can be a useful tool, just as photography can be a useful tool for artists. People who run away from that, I think, are turning their back on something that could definitely help their art.
Good to hear.
David, it could be a title of a song, if AI can make us cry.
Be very, very careful.
David, I want to just take a sidestep back to discussion about Van Gogh or Van Gogh. And a student, you're very fascinated by him and you studied a lot about him. And we had a discussion recently about something I only recently learned, was about how he actually became famous in the end, which was not his paintings, but his words, and his words combined with his images. And I was just looking back at your list of three things, talent, opportunity. He didn't have the opportunity, but that gave him the opportunity to, for his work to become famous anyway. Is there anything, that in your journey, where one thing has linked with another that's given you a leg up?
Okay, well, as I said, when I left politics after 25 years, I thought I'd be doing the occasional bit of painting and maybe having one of those mystical couple of months in the south of France experience. But almost straight away, I had galleries taking my work and I was off and running all around the world. Now, that doesn't happen to everyone all the time, and it's got very little to do with talent. It's about saying yes to everything. Don't knock back any opportunity, even if it doesn't look like an opportunity when it's presented. So I said yes to everything. And of course, I had, at the age of 60, had sufficient resources when a gallery in New York called up and said, "We like your work. Would you be interested?" And of course, I said yes. I'll be over there next week, so I can hop on a plane and go. Now, that doesn't happen for a lot of young, struggling artists, and the world is constantly changing in relation to art. You don't need galleries the way you used to. In fact, if there's anything that's becoming redundant, I think, in the art world, it's possibly galleries. I would have thought the last thing that people would buy online would be a painting. My feeling has always been that you need to see the painting in the flesh, to see the real colours, to see the brushstrokes, etc. 10 years ago, I started acquiring Aboriginal art. And of the 1,500 paintings that I have bought in that 10-year period, about 1,450 have been online. So you don't need to have that physical, direct, personal experience with art the way you used to. Consequently, galleries are much less important, and then are now wonderful opportunities. I mean, this is one of them, an opportunity to talk in this new media and to get your work out there.
David, I just there's a couple of things that you said there that I wanted to pick up on. But one of them was, you said you don't need galleries anymore, but you do. You have, I think you said you've got 14 galleries now around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And you're clearly very loyal to those galleries, and they're very loyal to you. So despite the fact of not needing them, you've chosen to go that way. And there's obviously there's a cost that comes with that, but you see the benefit. And because I just wanted, probably the other thing I wanted to talk about, they're not on your list of three things, but you have been, you're very commercial about your art. Compared to a lot of other artists. And so can you just talk to us about, I suppose, your business model or your thinking around you and the galleries and your commercial sort of outlook?
Well, two things. I just want to clarify what I said in relation to galleries. Young artists who are starting out don't need necessarily to go to galleries. For me, I need to, because I hate the idea of selling my own stuff. If people come to me and ask for paintings, I often say, "Oh, look, just take one." I am the worst salesman of my own work. So galleries are useful for that. But for anyone starting out, they don't need to be knocking on gallery doors anymore. In relation to my business model, I think that actually does come under one of those three pillars of success, and it's the one about attitude. I used to give talks to Queensland College of Art students towards the end of their course, and I would be very practical in my advice. In fact, sometimes so practical that I stopped getting invited, because I used to say to them, for example, that art is their plan A, but make sure they have a plan B. Very few of them will be, in 10 years' time, practicing artists. Now, the QCA didn't really like that piece of advice, but I think it's really important. You've got to be practical. It's all well and good to be talking about expressing one's innermost feelings. It's all well and good to be talking about art as a means of expression about all the terrors and challenges of the world, but you won't be able to continue to do that unless you have some practical foundation for your work. I used to say to those students, don't expect once you've got your degree in art, but that guarantees you're going to be able to sell paintings for $5,000, $10,000, $15,000. That was the expectation of many of them. I said the most important thing you can do is get your paintings out there. Whatever it takes, give them to people, give them to important people who have friends who may buy the painting that's up on their friend's wall. All of those things are absolutely essential to sort of kicking off a career. The other thing is look for a point of difference. There are so many artists who are doing the same thing. I gave up on a particular style of painting because I just felt that there were too many people in the marketplace who were doing much better work than I, and I basically moved in a direction that I felt comfortable with. I wasn't pushing myself to do something I didn't like, but I felt with my street scenes, I've been a street politician. I've been a councillor. So I related to the street. I love urban environments. So I said, okay, I should be painting those environments. And I love painting nighttime scenes. So I did that. I love rain and the effect, the mood, the atmosphere of rain, particularly at night. So much atmosphere and emotion. And so that was what I started to paint. And I felt that after a while, I was the only one who was doing that sort of work. Now, I say to all students, look for the point of difference. Learn from other artists, as Picasso is alleged to have said, all artists borrow, great artists steal. By all means, borrow. And please, borrow from me, borrow from Paul, borrow from anyone. But after a while, you'll end up doing your own thing, because that's just, I think, innate in all of us to do our own thing.
It's great that we finally started to talk about your work. I'm conscious that anyone listening will be saying, can you talk about painting a little bit? So I'm a newcomer to your work. A lot of beautiful colors, very the pictures are really, really easy to kind of fall into. You feel like you've been to all the places that you show. And there's a lot of scenes that look like New York street scenes, for example. There's one I spotted online, Dolphin Point, which I've been to once. And I instantly recognize it. Yeah, I've been there. So I love the way you can kind of fall into your paintings.
Well, I don't recommend people when they come to the gallery and see my paintings to fall into them, but I do appreciate that comment. Look, I get that sort of feedback about emotion, about nostalgia, about touching people emotionally. And I think part of the chemistry involved in creating that is very simple. It's blurring it out. It's not putting too much detail in. I think there are lots of artists, and this is one of the conscious decisions that I made with my own work. I used to do a lot of detail. I was quite a realist painter, super realist painter for a while. I would paint every brick in the building, and I worked out that it was much easier to just paint the building generally, and people were more warm to the painting because they were filling in the detail. When we see something, we see not with our eyes. We don't see with our eyes. We see through our eyes, and we see with our brain. And what our brain does with any image, and that's what a painting is. It's an image. That image is interpreted by our brain, and it uses two things: memory and imagination. So you mentioned a painting that reminded you of something. It was a memory of that particular place. When people see those misty, rainy New York scenes, they're imagining that it's New York. It may be Brisbane. It may be Sydney. I deliberately leave detail out so that others, through their imagination, can put the detail they want in. It's like when you read a great book and then the movie comes out. You've cast that book. You imagine everything about that book, the setting and the characters. When a film director makes a film, that's one person's imagination. And it often doesn't accord with your own. So with a painting, take more out and put less in, and you'll have people responding the way you did.
I've absolutely. You're talking to somebody that's a photographer dedicated to never making money out of his craft, which I've succeeded doing quite well, by the way. But yes, I battle with the camera's attention to detail. It's to me that's one of the struggles. It takes stuff out of photographs so that there is space for the viewer to kind of put themselves into it. I had a question to follow up on that, which was any tips? So instinctively, as creators, with photographers or painters, whatever, we want to put every detail, want to capture every brick. How do you get off that habit? How do you stop people putting too much detail in?
Yes, that's my job. Stopping people from putting too much detail in. I should have that on my business card. I sometimes get quite physical with people. I will take the brush from their hands gently and politely and say, enough is enough. I have got a number of mottos. One is, if in doubt, blur it out. And that works so many times. You'd be amazed. People, especially if they're putting figures in a painting, they're wanting to put, the color of the eyes, all the rest of it. Just keep it very general and blurred. The more general, the more blurred, the easier it is. I forgot to mention that important criterion. Not only is a more impressionistic style of work allowing people to use their imagination, it's also easier. Takes less time. You can do more paintings and you can send them more places. When Paul asked about the business plan, I realized I have for a very, very long time painted very quickly. I love quick paintings. They have an energy to them. They have movement in them. I think the faster that you use that brush, somehow that energy that goes into the action is transmitted onto the canvas. I hate it when I'm laboring over a painting and every brushstroke slows it down rather than speeds it up. So the beauty of that style and approach is that you're able to do it quickly. The painting looks better for it. People are able to use their imagination and you can move on to the next painting. Lovely.
David, I'm really curious. I know it probably might be, you might have a clear answer to this or not, I don't know. But do you know what drives you, like, to paint every day? I think you told me you paint every day of the year.
Yeah.
Do you know what drives you to keep exploring, expressing?
I think there is something innate in people. There are artists that I meet all the time who will have dry patches that last weeks, if not months, and I just don't understand that. I cannot let the day pass without painting. There have been times when I can't. When I've been in hospital, I've had 6 operations on these tired old eyes. And when I can't paint, I'm so restless. I'm at least thinking about painting. I'm not sure what it is. I'm not a good student of the impulse to paint. I have been studying, I think in a very informal way, how people respond to painting. And I think that's another element of that discussion about success in art. It's taking the time to ask people how they respond, why they like particular painting. And I've already mentioned imagination and the opportunity, the invitation that you give to someone to apply their imagination and their memory to a work. But I think it's the study of how people respond to painting is terribly important. A lot of artists don't ask the question, why didn't you like that painting? I asked that question of Bill Robinson 55 years ago, I think, when I was a student of his. And I put a work in to the exhibition that he was judging. And I said, Mr. Robinson, can you give me some feedback, please? You obviously didn't like my painting. He said, oh, no, I liked your painting, but it was clear, and you paint well, he said, but I don't think that you'll be doing really good work until you've suffered. And I was 18 at the time. Whenever I caught up with him again, he would always deny having said that. He said, it's a terrible thing to say to a young would-be artist that he said it, because it's the Van Gogh syndrome, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah.
Artists can't be real artists until they've suffered, till they've cut off their ear and bled onto the canvas. So I don't know what drives me. I just know that it's deep within me. It's sort of a productivity thing. I can't stand to be not in action. You know, there's that great Lord Tennyson thing, how dull it is to pause, to make an end, to rust unburnished, not to shine in use, as though to breathe were life. I don't want to rust. I want to keep painting. In fact, I should be painting now.
We're getting close to the end, David, so you can get back. So we don't want to send you into any sort of tailspin. But just on that, you talking about being a student, talking about Bill, you're also a great teacher, you know, and despite the fact that you just want to paint all the time, you know, you've been very generous with your time with me about giving me some advice recently. But I know that, you know, you run courses, and these people I speak to, other young artists, other artists who are young, is the way to say that.
Yeah, I appreciate that slight change of wording there, Paul.
Yeah.
Other young artists.
Talk about you as being very generous with your time. So, and I've known some artists over the years. Some have been generous, and some have been like, "Oh no, I can't share that. That's my secret," you know. But you know, so I'm just interested about your expansive view of helping others.
Well, firstly, I'd have to say we are all standing on the shoulders of others who've come before us, and I've already mentioned 2 of them, John Rigby and Bill Robinson. There have been others. I also want to say I'm not just a teacher; I'm also a student, and my students teach me things too, all the time. When I'm painting with other people, I see how they do something. I see something in a different way, and it affects the way I paint. So it's a symbiotic relationship. It's a 2-way street. I'm both learning and teaching at the same time. I figure it's a great honor after almost 60 years of painting to be able to share some of those secrets. I love telling secrets. It was why I was such an unsuccessful politician. I can't keep a secret. I want people to know the tricks of our trade. I want to break down the myths about art. I think there is far too much BS about the importance of art, and we've got to keep it mysterious. I say, bring down the blinds, reveal how art is produced, share that information. One of the great joys of my life now is teaching and painting with particularly young people, but people also who are retired and who are taking up painting for the first time. And I see the joy and the revelation in them when they put brush and paint to canvas, and they just get totally absorbed in the process, and they lose 2 or 3 hours. And I think
That's right. That's what painting used to be like for me too, 60 years ago.
And so they keep me in touch with the joy of art. And for me, that's probably the most satisfying part of this stage of my career.
I cannot believe this, but our time is almost up. That has just gone like that. But I know
It has.
back to your canvas.
I thought we'd only just begun.
We have, but
Well,
we've also been finished.
We might have to get you back again then for
I think so. I think that's my answer. Let's get you back. Yes, please.
David, look, can you, we always ask for a tip or a bit of advice or a couple of things. You know, you started with, I think, the things about talent, opportunity and attitude is the most important thing. But, whether it be for, a struggling artist or, for anyone who wants to either start or better their art.
Oh, that's a big question. I think I touched on it before, and that is to say yes to everything. Whenever there is an opportunity, find a way of getting in the middle of it. Just keep saying yes. If someone says, can you do a sketch with me? Don't be reluctant. Grab that opportunity. Open every possible door. Sometimes there's a monster behind it, but often it will lead to something glorious.
That's a great piece of advice.
I wish I'd taken that advice 60 years ago, by the way.
I'm glad you gave that bit of advice because I always draw a sketch during this thing of the person. But here's my drawing of you. Please put it up.
There is another piece of advice. Don't ever allow any other artist to sketch you. Nothing is more demeaning and horrifying than to be sketched by another artist. So many people, so many of my students have said, oh, can I do your portrait? Absolutely not. It's bad enough looking in a mirror.
David, look, this has been absolute. You dragged me out of my sickness. It's been absolutely enlightening. It's been so much fun.
It's been fun for me as well. Thank you both for the opportunity.
David, thank you so much. Great pleasure to chat to you.
My pleasure.
Oh, Chris, that was great. And look, I just didn't get to talk about it, but he is generous with his time. And in fact, David interviewed me for the launch of my recent book, Bold, Brave and Quirky, at the Avid Bookshop. So, which was a great conversation. The foot was on the other shoe. He was interviewing me, so I've returned the favour. But boy, what a fun, hey Chris?
Absolutely great fun. And I'm inspired by the idea of kind of blending teaching and art. I think that's a really interesting marriage because it clearly drives him. He said, I don't want to get rusty. And he's full of energy. And obviously you can sense that there's no end to the amount of painting that he'll share with us all. I'm really excited. I'm excited to pick up some paints. I've got some time off the job shortly and I'm going to bring some paints and some charcoals with me. So yeah. What an amazing show.
Yeah, look, inspirational he is prolific. He certainly is prolific. He's passionate and he's very open-minded and he's very practical. There's 3 P's for him: prolific, passionate and practical.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking for a P word with a fun word. Anyway, hope you enjoyed the show as much as Paul and I definitely did. If you did, please follow. We love it when people follow our show, which means you get notifications about future episodes. Give David a rating. And I would venture to suggest you should give him a very high rating, like a 5, because he's such an exciting guest. And of course, tell your friends about the Common Creative Podcast. We'd love you to help us spread the word, please.
Yes, that's great. Look, listen in next week for another exciting episode of the Common Creative Podcast.
See you then.